Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Courageous Conversations and Collapse Life book chat. We're very happy to be back with you. I'm Zahra of Collapse Life. I'm with Susan of Courageous Conversations. How are you, Susan?
I'm good today, thanks. And you?
Very well, thank you. And actually, the name of your Substack is the perfect entree for the topic of our conversation today. We have decided over the last week in talking that we're going to focus today's chat about the art and finesse of having difficult conversations. And there's a couple of reasons why we've chosen this as our topic to discuss today. And one of them stems from a book that your husband has been reading. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny because we went away last weekend to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. And this is the book that my husband took with him. I thought perhaps he's trying to tell me something, but it had been recommended to him from German Warfare, if you're familiar with his work.
Yes.
And it prompted Zara and we laughed about that, but we said, holidays are coming up. We're going to be spending more time with families, with friends. Perhaps it would be really good just to visit how to have difficult, courageous, or impossible conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love it. So in thinking about this, so this was something that around this time last year at Collapse Life, we were thinking about the same thing. And if we think back to last year, it seems like such a long time ago. We were in election season in America, and the polarization felt really, really visceral, like just that the country was split into, and how could we ever talk to each other about things? And I think a lot of that just gets exacerbated by the media. I'm not really sure that we are as far apart as we think we are. There are certainly extremes on either side, and those two extremes probably will never be able to get together. But most people tend to center around the middle. But I think we're told that we're farther apart than we are, and we feel like we can't talk to each other. I wanted to start with just a few statistics and get your reaction, Susan, and see if this surprises you or not. So first of all, there was a survey in October of last year, 2024, by the American Psychiatric Association, and they found that 1 in 5 people have actually cut ties with a family member because of political arguments.
Wow. Actually, I'm not surprised because I have personal experience of falling out with family, friends, no longer being friends with people after COVID.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, there is a lot of division, and I think that really severed a lot of ties or made relationships really difficult. And one of them I know, which is a close family one, is to make a decision to not go to certain areas of discussion,
Yeah.
which is a shame because if you have to watch what you say in a close relationship, then it's not really, in my view, a really healthy one in which you trust each other to respect
Exactly.
each other's views.
Exactly.
And it's an easy way out just to say we won't talk about it.
Yeah. Instead of actually just trying to see where the other person's coming from and agree to disagree. And just before I go on to the next statistic, I just want to invite our audience to share any of their thoughts with us. Tell us about difficult conversations that you've had. Tell us about tactics that have worked, or perhaps tactics that haven't worked that you would warn people to stay away from. But definitely share your thoughts with us in the comments on whatever platform you may be watching us on. The next statistic actually comes from the UK, where you are, Susan, and there was research this summer in July of 2025 that found 1/3 of adults say they rarely or never have opportunities to meet people from different backgrounds. And I think this is really symptomatic of why we feel like we can't have difficult conversations. We have, either by default or by design, ended up creating our own echo chambers where we're surrounded by people who see the world the same way as we do. I think COVID really pushed us there because we were so reliant on technology and algorithms to see the world through. And so the algorithm either shares outrage at the exact opposite of what you believe, or it shares with you more content that conforms with what it thinks you believe. And so, we don't get out into the real world and meet as many people as we once did. And it sort of surprised me. 1/3 of people don't get to meet people from other backgrounds.
Yeah, I think that's a growing trend. I don't think it was always like that. In the UK, we have what we call pubs. There'd be bars to you, probably. And in the pub, you'd have the saloon bar and the public bar. And the public bar, lots of people would go in, they would mix with other people, meet all sorts of people and visitors and just people locally and that doesn't seem to exist so much anymore, because here pubs have become like restaurants.
Mm.
So you're isolated when you go in. You don't get that sort of camaraderie that used to be there. So, and a lot of pubs are closing. So that sort of means of bringing people from different backgrounds, different ages together is now being very limited.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard one to turn around in terms of how do we solve for that. Because you can tell people, try and have as many in real life relationships as possible. But again, that you end up self-selecting. You'll go to maybe a club or an activity that you enjoy. You're going already with people who enjoy that same activity. So you're already sort of self-selecting into a group of people that are similar to you. So it's harder and harder to just put yourself in a place where you might actually encounter um, very different backgrounds. But I would say that it's as hard as it may be, um, it's a really good thing to do. It's actually, even if it makes you uncomfortable, I think this is another thing. We seem to avoid discomfort at all costs, and it's really how we grow and learn, is by actually challenging ourselves. This last one will not come as a surprise. This was from a couple of years ago, in 2022. There was a survey that found that on both political ends of the spectrum, between 60 and 70% of Americans viewed the opposing party as more immoral than other Americans. So if you were a Democrat, you thought Republicans were more immoral, and vice versa. And again, I just think, it's politics that have largely led us to where we are. And the more outrageous a politician is, the more media attention they will get. So there's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy going on about just showing the extremes rather than just the normal. I mean, normal conversations between normal people don't make the news.
No, they don't. And it's also, in my opinion, about a false dichotomy, because in the UK we have left and right, you have Democrats and Republicans, but to me they're all the same party. They're
Yeah,
just different players.
yeah.
And if we get lost in the weeds of, well, my side's this and your side's that, that divides us, doesn't it? Which is not the enemy. It's just the state calling the shots, just another candidate, another president or prime minister who's there. But the policies are very, very similar in lots and lots of ways. So that divide is a false one.
Absolutely. Completely constructed. And it's also an argument that cannot be won. If you're at your holiday table and there's someone from the opposite party, and you try and argue that everyone in their party is immoral or corrupt, and then they come back at you and say, well, what about your party? I mean, who's going to win? There's no winning that argument. And ultimately it's a moot point. These are political figures. They're all corrupt. They're all after power. they don't really have our interests at heart. So, when we come down to the tactics, the things that are suggested in our guide and in the book that you have in front of you, I mean, I think that's one of them is recognizing that the political dichotomy is not the place to start. What we have up on the screen is the guide that we prepared for our readers last year and updated again this year. It's the Collapsed Life Guide to difficult Thanksgiving conversations. And we made it available to our paid subscribers on collapsedlife.com. So if anyone cares to join us as a paid subscriber, that is one of several tools and guides that we have available. We also made it available as a standalone guide that you can buy off of our Buy Me a Coffee page. It's just $4.99. And maybe we can go through some of the tactics in it. And Susan, I know you've seen it and you are kindly one of our paid subscribers, so you have access to the guide. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I guess one alternative is to just avoid controversy altogether. But as you said, that already sort of puts conversations or relationships in a tenuous situation, because everybody's trying to avoid potholes of what can I not say, what can I say, and it just doesn't create a very good environment for family or friend relationships. So let's talk about how we can successfully talk about things even if we don't always agree.
Yeah, and it's always an option just to not talk about it and to be a witness. And we can talk about that a little bit more. I think it's deciding. I think number one, so you've got your 10 steps. So number one is know your audience. And I think that's a really good place to start is what's the relationship? So if it's family, it's a relationship that you want to stay in with. So your strategy will be based on that. But if it's a stranger in the bar or the pub, then it might not be worth your effort and energy.
Yeah.
So the first one, which I really like, is know your audience and make a decision about whether it's worth the effort. And the other one that I think is really important is, are they curious? Do they want to know your point of view, or are they closed about things? So being very clear about how open are you and how open are they to a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no point in hammering your opinions or your viewpoints on someone who has no interest in hearing what you think. Why would you do that? I think it's just going to be frustrating to you. It's going to be frustrating to them. And it's going to be a dead end conversation. I think the other thing inherent in the idea of know who you're talking to is just whether it is someone who you've known all your life or whether it's someone that you've just encountered in a public forum. Just remember that that person is a human being just like you. They have likes and dislikes, and they have their right to their own opinion, and they deserve to be treated with the respect that you would expect them to treat you with. So don't reduce people to caricatures or stereotypes. I think that's really important. And it's very easy sometimes to be reductionist and to just come down to the lowest common denominator, but it's not conducive to a fruitful conversation.
No, I totally agree. I had one a little while ago in my actual real life book club, where we suddenly got into a discussion about how awful the world was. And somebody in my book club's got absolutely symmetrically opposed views to me about what's going on in the world and is very, very vociferous about it.
Yeah.
And I found myself initially, like his old pat, it's like, God, you're so naive. You obviously believe everything that you're reading in mainstream news. And I had to wheel myself back in and actually go, this is really good. We're actually talking about some significant things here. So it was sort of like the first point is recognize your own patterns and your own prejudices and judgments and try and put those to one side and see this as an opportunity to explore things. And it turned out to be a really rewarding conversation. In fact, we all said afterwards, wasn't that great? And there were a number of things within that conversation that we'll probably cover this afternoon. But let me just say, one was keep reinforcing. So I kept saying, isn't it great that we're actually having a conversation about this, even though we don't agree about some of the different things.
Yeah.
And I asked a question at one point towards the end. I said, with all these terrible things going on in the world, how's that affecting you personally?
Mm.
And then we got into a really specific thing about how people are going to change their lives. One of my friends is an artist. She's going to plans to sell her house so that she's financially more secure and move into somewhere smaller.
Mm.
And she's quite well known. So she was saying that she's not going to be in private galleries anymore. She's going to be in public spaces. She doesn't want anything more to do with corporatism or, really interesting. And that would never have come out unless we continued our very difficult and uncomfortable conversation to start with.
What I love about that line of questioning, though, is it's open-ended, and it brings things back into the realm of personal rather than ideological or political, because in all of these things, there is a personal impact, and everyone feels it, and perhaps we feel it the same way, perhaps we feel it differently. But what's so lovely about how you opened up that avenue is just by asking a question that anyone can answer. And then by actually listening, not just throwing out a question and then going back into your brain thinking about what am I going to say next, actually listening, you can really hear, like, this person may disagree with me fundamentally on almost everything, but they still have personal emotional connections to the outcome. And I need to understand that. And I think that's where, we can be empathetic and compassionate, without using those words in really squishy ways. That really is empathy. It's listening and hearing how the things that are happening are affecting that person, and really, feeling what they're feeling.
And most people are frightened at the moment. Things are very scary, very uncertain. There's lots of continual noise and news to
Mhm.
create that fear. And so it's recognizing that's where people are coming from when they're talking about the things that concern them and how awful this is or that is. That the common ground is that we're all trying to make sense of it and find our way through. And that's the joy of having a conversation like that. You
Yeah.
can appreciate that we're doing it in our way, but we can join together and say, yeah, and we need to support each other through
Mhm.
this.
That's one of the
Um,
other things that, I'm sure, I know it's in our guide, and I'm sure it's in Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay's book as well, is finding that common ground. And that's probably a good place to start in having these conversations, is sort of saying, look, we all agree that there are problems, or, we're all concerned about the economy, or, finding the thing that you do agree on before jumping into all the things you don't agree on. It really just establishes that, that there is a give and take, a two-way dialogue. We are in agreement on this, and then we may diverge here or there, but there are some fundamental starting places where we all stand at the same place.
yeah, this is, I think it's also about intentions, isn't it? Which is number 2 on your list. And we mentioned earlier about if your intention is to go in and win and change their mind about the world and suddenly have a eureka moment and they see the wisdom of your argument, then you're not going to win. You're
Mm.
never going to achieve that. What you're looking for is that you're actually able to have that conversation
Yeah.
without falling out, and really being clear about what's my intention here.
Yeah.
Is it just to put a little seed maybe of doubt by my questions that I ask? or is it really just to find out more about where they're coming from and why they take the stance that they do? What is
Yeah.
it? Because a lot of people, their beliefs are associated with their identity. So by challenging their beliefs, they feel personally threatened by that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's really going cautiously in that way.
Yeah. And that intention piece is so important because it's really important for us to question our own beliefs as well. Why do I believe the things that I believe? And if you're intending to go into one of these conversations just to prove how smart you are and how stupid the other person is, then don't have the conversation. It's not that's not what this is about, or trying to win an argument because you have the better set of evidence. It's if you put yourself in the other person's position, how would you feel walking away from that conversation? Is that really how you want to leave somebody feeling? Um, Especially when it's your family and closest friends around a holiday table. Is that really where you want to leave that? So I think that was kind of what we were getting at in that section about question your intention is, why do you want to be talking about these topics? Is it because you really truly want people to start to see things differently? And I think that that's really important, and why it is important to have these conversations, even if they are difficult. It's very important to um, keep conversations going about topics that matter, rather than leaving everything in the trivial just because we don't want to go there. Um, so, so yeah, that was kind of what prompted um, this guide altogether. Is we do need to keep talking, we need to be sharing ideas, but also learning from other people's ideas. But don't do it if your goal is just to fill your own ego. We do have a comment. Parameter 9 says, what about taking your friend to use AI together? That way you can ask a third party and by skill get the answer to something you will both accept. What are your thoughts on that, Susan? It's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea, but it depends what AI comes up with, doesn't it? And it might just cause more friction, or them just saying, "Oh, well, that's only AI," and we all know that doesn't tell the truth all the time. Um, yeah, I think I think you just got to explore practice some of the things that we've said here. And you mentioned something earlier, Zahra, which was about the facts. And one of the things that's very clear in this book is don't turn up with loads of facts. Don't try and put over your evidence, because they'll just draw out their evidence and you will just get into a very heated debate on whose evidence is, yeah. And if it's AI evidence, then that's not going to do anything that's constructive. So
Mhm.
never resort to facts. I think that's one of your things, isn't it, as
It
well?
is jumping a little bit out of order,
Yeah,
but
sorry,
yes,
but you
no, I
mentioned it.
think it's
Yeah.
good. It's yeah, the argument there is that if you come with your mountain of data, you know that the other side is going to come with their mountain of data. And data can be manipulated so many different ways. You can cherry pick data, you can pull one thing out of context. It can be weaponized, like a hand grenade. So throwing out all these studies and all these statistics, it might just push somebody farther into their own beliefs rather than drawing them into a discussion. Um, so I think it's always, I know I've been in conversations where I have said something and the person that I'm talking to immediately grabs their phone and goes to Google to try and fact check me, or to find a statistic that will support the thing that they think in contradiction to the thing I just said. And it just feels so demoralizing and so useless to engage in conversations like that. So this kind of brings us back to this idea of open-ended questioning as a really good tactic for um, getting to a conversation that matters. it's very much the method that's laid out in the book that your husband is reading. It's the Socratic method. It's asking questions that prompt the person that you're talking to tell you why they believe what they believe, or to state their argument clearly. Um, and it's very often where somebody's belief starts to fall apart, because if they can't state it in a way that makes sense to them, then they might actually start questioning, that is true, why do I believe that, where did I get that from, is it just something that I heard, or is it something that I've experienced and know intrinsically. If you do have that intrinsic knowledge of something, you'll be very able to state your argument clearly. But if it's just um, propaganda that you've heard that came in one ear, you might start questioning. And I think it's, again, really important to use that method on ourselves as well, to question, why do I think that, where did I get that from? Because the path that you've been on for a long time and I've been on for a slightly shorter period has led us to question everything. We don't need to just believe things that we were told when we were children. We should question everything and figure out, where did that idea come from, and does it hold up?
And being willing to admit that you're wrong, or that you don't know, or one of the things that I said during the conversation I've just referred to is, none of us know the truth. None of us are party to exactly what's going on. We're all just doing the best we can with the information that we're being given from whatever source we choose.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting one, isn't it, about questions. And you're great at asking questions, and you do hundreds of interviews, Zahra, so you are like having difficult conversations all the time, and really good at asking questions. But even in everyday conversation, I rarely find people ask questions, never mind in difficult ones. My husband and I, sometimes when we went to drinks parties, which I abhor, and that was one of the good things about COVID, they stopped. But we used to go, and we used to have this little game to see if anybody actually asked us a question, or whether they just bombarded us with their opinions or their memories from wherever,
Yeah.
and who actually takes any interest or asks, apart from the "what do you do" or "how are you," but really is curious. I come back to that one again, because I think a good conversation is based on curiosity. Not just your views, but who are you as a person, and
Yeah.
to be seen. I think that's the joy of a wonderful, rich, nourishing conversation. And that's the disappointment if you can't have those conversations with people you're close to,
Yeah.
because you're missing out on that growth, that development of not just yourself, but the relationship, and you're building trust, which is like so precious nowadays. This is why I think having conversations and having the courage and taking the risk is so important, because they're trust building.
I think courage is such an interesting idea, and it's baked into the name of your Substack. So talk a little bit about what do you what do you think that means, a courageous conversation? And also, let's just pause and make sure that anyone who's watching has a chance to share their thoughts and ask any questions. So please, we welcome all your ideas and all your insights.
Yeah, especially the early one, for it's parameter 9. So yeah, thank you for your thoughts. And lots
Mhm.
of people do turn to AI, and have relationships with AI now. They're far easier, aren't they? And more rewarding in lots of ways, because it always tells you how great you are.
You're so smart. What a great insight.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if every engagement we had in the world with someone was as keenly interested in what we have to say, and everyone said, "Oh, Zahra, that is really a great insight. You've hit the nail on the head."
Yeah, but this is the danger, isn't it? So many people are now turning to that as as their main sort of social contact, for want of a better word, because they're finding real life relationships tricky and messy, and they are. And they take hard work and they take
Mm.
investment, don't they? And they take courage, to talk about things which are difficult, to share views that the other person will challenge in some ways. I've been in family situations where there's a lot of name calling going on,
Mm.
and it's deeply hurtful because you think, well, you're not listening to me, you're just dismissing me straight away.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier just to withdraw. And that's a valid choice, isn't it? If you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table and somebody's really having a go about things, and they've had too much to drink or they've had loads of sugar, then you just don't want to get in a fight with them.
Yeah.
So you decide that you'll sit there and be a witness, and you'll be recognizing the triggers and go, oh yeah, that's another one. Yeah, that's a good one. Or you'll be taking account of your breathing,
Mhm.
really concentrating on your feet, all the things that calm your nervous system
Yeah.
down rather than getting caught up in an argument that might be going on. It's very valid just to sit out.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think if if the other person's voice is raising and their anger is coming out and they're leaning in and their eyes are getting bigger, then you really, you do have a valid choice to sit back and just say, I'm not going to engage in this because it's not going to be useful. But how do you avoid, Susan, not just sort of internalizing that, or stocking up? I think a lot of people will be in that situation, maybe listening to the other person and making a bullet point list of all the crazy things that they just said, storing it in your back pocket for the next time you engage with that person. How do you just sort of stay witness and placid in that moment, but then also leave it behind when you walk away?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a number of points there. One is to do anything that regulates your nervous system again, and just let it go. That moment has passed, and maybe a little bit of reflection about, I could have said this or that could have happened, but don't beat yourself up about it, and acknowledge the fact that you stayed calm and you stayed out of it. That in itself is a triumph.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you can, going back to questions again, is ask someone a question, did you know that such and such is another view, or some people think this, or the other one I would say is validate what people are saying. And if you can do it in the right voice tone without letting sarcasm creep in, is repeat back to them. Do a sort of really good summary of what
Mhm.
they've just said to demonstrate, A, you've been listening, but B, sometimes when we hear our views repeated back to us, we sort of like, oh, that does sound a bit weird or a bit crazy, or where
Or
did
you
that
give the
come
other
from?
person a chance to correct you if you've misunderstood it, right? So
Yeah.
if you say something and I say, "What I'm hearing you say is XYZ, is that what you meant?" They can say, "Yeah, that's exactly what I meant." Or they could say, "No, I think there's a nuance there that you've missed." And then you can actually be having a proper conversation, and you might be able to understand their position a little bit better rather than just attacking where you think they're coming from, which isn't going to be useful.
Oh, from free will, if any of that possible, when identity politics reduces people to toxic, racist, Karen, terrorists, etc., how do you build trust after dehumanization? I think you just have to hang in there. I mean, from my own experience of being, on the end of name calling and things, you just have to find, well, I think in the situation I'm thinking about, I exited and walked away and took some time out.
Mhm.
And then I came back and I noticed everybody was interested in repairing the relationship. so, so I certainly didn't go, that was terrible, what happened. I think we all just sort of pretended it didn't happen. and did what we could to repair it. So we could actually, because we were out, we were in a restaurant. So, you know, unless somebody wanted to storm off, which is always a possibility, you've got to find a way of making it work. And they were family. So,
Yeah.
I felt very wounded for quite a while afterwards.
Yeah.
But
I
I,
wonder if questions would work in this situation too. So if you're the one who's being dehumanized by some label being thrown at you from someone else, can you turn that into a question and say, "Oh, why do you think I'm toxic?" Or why did you just call me a Karen? What was it? And then make them kind of
mm,
validate why they were just throwing an invective at you. Um, I think,
yeah,
I think what one thing that often happens, for better or for worse in these situations is, let's say you're in that kind of heated debate and somebody throws an invective at you. We often respond by laughing. And if that other person is taking themselves very seriously, that can really throw them off and actually make things much worse. You might feel kind of good about that in the moment, but again, if the goal is to try and actually get back to um, a valid conversation, that's just an escalation of a place that's not going. It's a conversation that's not going in a good direction in the first place. Um, but I think it's a really good point. And Free Will, if you have any other thoughts to add to that, or experience that you want to share, please let us know.
oh, and I think there's some more questions coming in. So let me, so we've talked about intentions, timing, know your audience, ask questions, building on common ground, which is number 5 in your guide. Incrementalism. I thought this was interesting. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Zahra?
Yeah. So when we were putting this guide together, one of the thoughts was helping other people understand where we are today, and that's kind of what Collapse Life is all about. Is unpacking what is the world that we live in, why are things happening, why do they feel like they're accelerating, and incrementalism is just this idea that things get pushed very minutely at a time, until we find ourselves way farther away from something where we used to be. So we can get pushed very, very slowly. Like it's that idea of frogs in a boiling pot, which is sort of an apocryphal story. But if you put frogs in warm water and slowly increase the heat, they won't even know what's happening until it's too late. But if you throw a frog in a boiling water, it will just immediately jump out of the pot. It's just this analogy to help people understand that this has been a slow process that's been incoming for a while. And where we are today isn't just because everything was perfect and then Donald Trump became president. It's been, moving along in this direction for a while. So, and that's just an example that I'm using, but, it's just to help people understand that this has been coming, and you can use examples maybe to help them see. Remember when the Patriot Act was brought in? That was 25 years ago. How did we get here now? Like, just again, just kind of showing that it didn't just happen yesterday, and it's not the fault of one person or one group of people. But I do want to pop over because there's some great comments, and thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts. So we have Michael de Vlieger, who says, to something we previously said, this is essential. We have to leave the door open to other people and ideas, yet not get emotional when there's disagreement. If seeking truth, it's important to hear contrary ideas. And I think that really is such an important point. We claim to be after the truth, and you can't really ever get to the truth unless you're open to questions. And I mean, this is the scientific method in and of itself. Ask questions to advance knowledge. That's how we get to truth. So if we feel stuck and won't let anyone question what we believe, we're at an end game. So thank you, Michael. And there's another point from Michael, which is whatever happened to names will never hurt me. Again, avoid getting emotional and have some fortitude. Ad hominem is a sign the other party has already lost, since they can't argue via logic and sense. Thank you for that. And then Darren Mossman says, most people are not intelligent enough to engage in serious conversation. I tend to just say the truth and be damned how people deal with it.
Oh, different ways, different strategies, aren't there? And if that works for you, then that's fine. I think the other thing about incrementalism is, for a lot of us, have our claps aware and have been for quite a long time. And therefore, us just even talking about claps, we have to remember that to a lot of people, that's very threatening.
Yeah.
They're coming into it quite cold or been in denial a long time. And they don't have the background and knowledge. I mean, Eckhart Tolle talks about they're operating from their level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. I mean, if we think back to our own sort of learnings, which are sort of constant nowadays, aren't they? But there are lots of things that we weren't aware of and didn't know about, or it could be our topic area, because sometimes I find I'm really in agreement with somebody on one topic and miles away on another topic,
Yeah.
which they don't seem to know anything about because they haven't spent the time there that I have. So it's just recognizing that we're all at different levels of education, aren't we, within this crazy world?
100%. And then also making sure that there's room for people to change their mind, and not punishing them for having held a belief that they may be starting to realize is false, or making them feel stupid for asking a question that you came to the answer decades ago. I think we have to allow for people to give them room and give them, comfort to be able to say, that's interesting. I never really thought about that. I might need a little time to kind of, a lot of these things really shake the foundations of how people have built their lives. And so you can't just pull the rug out from them and expect them to just be standing up straight and be okay with that. And so that's, again, this kind of idea of incrementalism is just a little bit at a time, helping people understand, again, through really open-ended and respectful questioning, and also allowing that, you may be wrong. And we've changed our minds from what we used to think about things before, and no doubt we'll change our minds again. And so we have to allow that as well. I was wrong. I changed my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I've changed my mind loads of times about things and things that I used to think. And, I think also, isn't that our role within the Collapse Aware community? That we want to be supporting other people, not that they come on our side, but that they have the inside knowledge that's necessary to help them prepare mentally and physically for what's going on. So I see that's another motive, isn't it, to have these conversations
Yeah.
and respectfully. I mean, that's number 8, respond respectfully. And it's also about the language. There's so many things about the actual language that you use, not using but, using the word and, not saying however, because that's sort of, you're more or less saying, well, you've said all that, but I don't believe any of it, and here's my view. And is a much softer way of linking something. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of skills in conversation that none
Absolutely.
of us are taught. They don't teach this in school. We have to learn through experience and books and guides.
Free will came back with a little bit of further thought on what we were saying before. So the person who's doing the smear tends to get defensive. They say cognitive dissonance is real. Laughing rarely helps, which all very good points. And the cognitive dissonance piece is a really important one to sit on, Susan, because especially with the kinds of topics that that you um, and we at Collapse Life deal with, but particularly, things like climate change, for example. There's that's a topic that you shifted your view on, and um, it's really true. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance. There's a lot of people who just refuse to kind of see the full picture, and dealing with people like that can be very difficult, and it can be a bit mind-boggling sometimes, and it does push us to emotional states rather than rational states very often. Yeah. And then
Very,
just
yeah.
one more point. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure that we get this comment from Parameter 9 as well, who was asking incrementalism, as in delayering the issues. And that comment goes along with know your customer. I think that's true. So, again, going back to that first point of knowing your audience, knowing what they know. And that might come through actually asking a question. How much do you know about IPCC data, or just asking someone that question to establish the common ground? How much do they know about a topic that maybe you know more about, and where can you fill in gaps or help them balance their understanding? Sorry, I interrupted you before.
No, no, I was just going to pick up on the defensiveness, because I think that's often what happens when we get our beliefs challenged. We
Yeah.
get all defensive about it and think that we have to defend our beliefs. And I think one of the things that when you are looking at what's happening in the world, you can recognize, as we've just said, that our beliefs are very mutable and they can change at any time. And also to be comfortable with that you could be wrong, that we could have got the and say that,
Yeah.
that was something I used in that other conversation. It's just like, I could be wrong about this, because that deflates it. I remember Paul Newman, there was a joke about he went into a bar and he'd been making some film, if people know who Paul Newman is,
Mhm.
and he'd been playing a strongman, and he could see people sort of eyeing him up, and he just shouted out, "Anybody in this bar could beat me." And it apparently, but it's that whole thing that if you are not a threat, if you are willing to expose your beliefs and values and have them questioned, then
Yeah.
you're modeling, aren't you? You're showing people that I'm not going to get into name calling. I'm tempted to, but I'm really working hard at staying with it and being the calm person, because the other person will pick up that calm. It's all about body language.
Yeah.
Conversations are very complex. So there's a whole thing about rhythm and timing and having rapport with people.
Yeah.
And it's through conversations that we develop those skills. And as I said, and we build relationship, because I've got relationships with people that I know locally, and all we do is say hello, and we might talk about a restaurant that we've been to. And I've known these people for 15 years,
Yeah.
but our conversation never goes further than the weather and restaurants.
Yeah.
They're not satisfying. They're okay, but they're not going anywhere. It's the Woody Allen, relationships are like sharks. They've got to keep on the move, otherwise they're dead. Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, I think in a robust life, you have levels of conversation and levels of relationship, and not everyone has to be that deep thinking conversational partner. In some places you might share one interest and only talk about that thing that you agree on, and never talk about the other things. Maybe you don't know anything about their private life or anything about their political views, and maybe that's a blessing, because really all you care about is the movies that you like, or sharing recipes, or whatever it is. So I think it's okay to have those layers, and not try and convince everybody that that they need to think about a certain thing differently. Anyway, so
I agree. That goes back to number one, doesn't it? About know your audience.
yeah, yeah,
And those sort of, relationships are really valid and satisfying and fun.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't always want to be having really serious conversations about topics which are difficult, you
Yeah.
also want people in your life who you enjoy and are light and easy and joyful and you can have a laugh with.
Yeah.
That's also part of the art of
Yeah.
conversation, isn't it?
And I think we've also come to a place now where it's quite easy to self-select, just being around people who share the same thoughts as you do, and so you can have easy conversations with those people because you don't have to worry about the third rail, the topic that's going to blow everything up. But um, it can also become quite limiting if you only surround yourself with people who think the same as you. Because you're not learning anything, you're not growing, you're not gathering more experience to build on in future. So again, it just goes back to having a rich life where you encounter all kinds of different people who have all kinds of different views on things, and you just go openly into all of those engagements and think, what can I take from this, instead of closing down and thinking, oh, this person is going to tell me something I don't want to hear. I just want to pause for a really quick second to thank Michael de Vlieger, who commented, "This is a great and useful conversation." And we thank you for that. And we're really glad that you're taking part in it. Um,
And also another one from Free Will, because that's the other thing. We haven't talked about online conversations,
mhm.
because I certainly think that the world needs your voice. We are crying out for people who are willing and courageous enough to speak up about things, and to do it online is really tricky because you're bound to come in and come across people who don't agree with you, and can be quite vicious. He mentions challenging them, trolling, or calling them angry. All of those things are really relevant, and it's very difficult in this world where you can be cancelled at any moment because you haven't said the right thing.
Yeah. I think, social media, obviously, social media and technology have widened our opportunity for these kinds of conversations. You and I would not know each other and be able to do this at all if it weren't for Substack. And so the same with, the earlier comment about AI. AI as a tool has wonderful qualities as well as downsides. Same with social media. Um, I think the thing that's happened with social media is it's very easy to say something horrible to somebody when you don't have to look at them, when you don't have to see the glimmer that goes across their face when they actually get wounded by your words. So people say things in comments that they would never say to each other if you were actually face to face. And particularly, like you said, if you were face to face with someone who's bigger than you, or who looks like they could definitely deliver a harmful blow on you, you're going to watch what you say. But on online, you have no idea. I mean, and most of the time, you're not even really talking to a real person. I mean, I'm grateful that right now I know I'm talking to you because I can see you on video, and I know that the people who are leaving comments here are actually listening because they're responding to things that we're saying. It's not just a bot army, but so many times the things that we see online are actually not real. They're just constructed. And so it's a blessing and a curse. It's a really difficult one. It's good for us all to kind of pause before we type, and also in the same way take with a grain of salt what you read, and don't feed the trolls. If someone is trying to goad you into some kind of online fight, just step back. And it's probably not worth it, again, unless you have something invested in the relationship that you have with that person online. It's probably not worth engaging with troll like behavior.
Well, your point number 10 in your guide is how to exit gracefully, which seems incredibly appropriate as we bring this to a close. It is, yeah, there's always an option to back out, to leave, and certainly with trolling and viciousness online, I think it's really, and when you think about it in that way, having these difficult or impossible conversations are again ways in which we build our capacity to deal with difficulty, to build resilience, to build trust, as we've been talking about. And so there's huge value in being able to upgrade. All of us could be daily practicing our conversational skills
Mhm.
and getting better at it,
Yeah.
and not be dumbed down by just talking to AI all the time,
Yeah.
but talking to real people, and the messiness of that and the joy of that. So
I
thank you, Zahra. It's been a really good conversation as
Yeah,
always, and I
likewise.
appreciate it.
I absolutely agree. You know, by having these kinds of conversations, we just remind each other what it means to be human. And this is how you build trust and respect with someone, is by engaging and showing them that it's okay to talk about things, and it's okay that we don't agree on things. It's okay that we don't always see eye to eye, but at least we can have these kinds of conversations. It's just what you said in your book club discussion. Like, isn't it great that we can at least have a conversation, that we can at least be in a situation where we can agree to disagree? How wonderful. So let's just make sure that all of us, your homework for the week is to go out and have a conversation with someone, and let it go wherever it wants to go, and don't be afraid of what might happen. You know, I think cancel culture and all of that stuff online the last few years especially has made us afraid of what might happen, and that's not a good place to be. So thank you all for listening and for sharing your thoughts, and thank you, Susan.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and your comments. Very
Before
welcome.
before we go, we'll just do a little bit of kind of housekeeping announcements. We're going to take the next 2 weeks off from the Collapse Life Courageous Conversations book chat. Um, the next week I will be traveling, and the week after that it is American Thanksgiving, and so we just decided we'll take a little break. We'll come back in the first week of December, and we're going to try a different day and time to see if it works better for people. So right now we're doing this Thursday. It's morning in the US and it's afternoon in the UK, but we were wondering what people thought about a Sunday discussion. So let us know in the comments on whatever platform you're watching us on, or send us an email, info@collapselife.com. Let us know if you would prefer to keep it as a weekday, or if a Sunday works better. It would be around 6 p.m. UK time, which is it's a range of times here in the US, everything from about 10 a.m. On the West Coast to 2 p.m. on the East Coast, that kind of thing. So time to just kind of sit back with either a cup of coffee or your afternoon treat, and just join us for conversation. So let us know what you think of that time change, and we will see you next month.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for
Bye.
being here.
Thank you.